Hey y'all, it's Maritime in America again, a podcast where we're charting America's offshore stories. It's the only podcast that highlights mariners' perspectives on issues facing the offshore community and the greater U.S. maritime community. I'm your host, Aaron Smith of the Offshore Marine Service Association. Each Friday, I'll bring you the Offshore Briefing, a quick rundown of the week's notable developments, updates, and news you need to know in the offshore space. In addition, we'll feature a special guest from the maritime world, bringing a mariner's voice and real-world perspectives straight to the show. Joining me are my co-hosts, Ashley and Angelle, where we'll strengthen the maritime American mariner's voice by diving into the people, policies, and powerful currents shaping the U.S. maritime community. Whether you're on deck or at your desk, we're glad you're here. Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of Maritime in America. And I'm here with my co-hosts, as always, Angelle and Ashley. How are y'all doing?
Good morning. We're good. Is it still morning? Yes, it's 11. Good morning.
Yeah, doing well today.
Good. And we are back for our now third episode of the flagship of Maritime in America. And I'm really excited about today's guest. We talk a lot about family and the family nature of this industry. And we talk about supporting the mariners in the industry. And, we don't have a mariner today, but we have someone that, I know I've been watching her career for a while, and I see that the mariners I speak to always speak so highly of her. And now that she's connected with AMSA in a greater extent and on our board of directors, I definitely, it's easily understood why. So someone that just has made a career of supporting the mariners. So it's so good to have on our guest, Stacey Jo Stanley, the president and CEO of Offshore Oil Service. Stacey, welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks, Aaron. It's good to be here.
Welcome.
I've been watching your podcast and listening to it in the car, and real excited about it. I think it's interesting, and I can't wait to see who the next guests are going to be.
I'd
Well,
also like
thanks.
to point out how exciting it is that it's 3 against 1.
Yeah.
It's never like that. It's always like 600 against 3 or 4. So I like that we can gang up on you, Aaron.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
You should be used to it. We have 2 daughters, and all of our animals are female too. So he's used to it.
Yep. Yes, I am. Yes. But Stacey, it is great to have you. And tell the audience about yourself.
Well, yes, I am the president and CEO of Offshore Oil Services. It is the fourth company that the Muchowich family has owned and operated, that operates in the Gulf of Mexico. We were established in 1968, but I know that we had a fleet of boats by 1932 because I did a little bit of homework this week. Aaron and I talked about this at the DC event, and I said that I felt like I had some pretty good documentary evidence that the company had a fleet of boats going back to 1932, but I wasn't really comfortable saying further back than that. So, but I know that by 32, they had a fleet of shrimp boats, and they were in the Freeport, Texas area, and there was a hurricane that year. So I found a newspaper article about them making it through that hurricane that destroyed the fleet, but they survived and they picked back up and reinvented themselves and continued on after that. So
That's so
it's
cool.
been nearly 100 years for our
Wow.
family.
And anyone who doesn't know, the Muchowich family history is just absolutely incredible. And so Stacey, explain the history of Carl Muchowich, kind of the what would you say? I guess the first, I don't want to say the patriarch, because that does not fit this company and your family at all. Not in the least, but I guess the founder, the U.S. founder of the family. Explain that story. It's an amazing story.
Yeah, he's my immigrant ancestor. He came here in 1907, and he came from Warsaw, Poland, all by himself. He was 18 years old and had $12 in his pocket, and he arrived at Galveston in 1907. And evidently, the Galveston was still reeling from the hurricane of 1900, trying to rebuild the city. And his paperwork said he was going to Oklahoma to work on the railroad. I don't know if he ever ended up there. We haven't found any records that show that he went to Oklahoma. The next thing we see is he ended up in Port Arthur, Texas, and was working at the Texas Company Refinery, which I believe is what became Texaco. I'm not 100% certain, but I think it became Texaco. And but yeah, he came from a family that lived in Warsaw, and his father was an inventor. We didn't find this out until maybe 20 years ago. We heard rumors that Carl's father invented the Yale lock, and we thought it was just a bunch of baloney. Nobody really believed the story. And sure enough, my mother uncovered the patent that was filed in 1902 in the United States by a Polish lawyer. And he evidently filed the patent not only in the United States, but in many, many countries. They filed the same patent for this tumbling lock system. And it turns out the old man was telling the truth, that his father did invent the Yale lock. Well, we don't know if it was the Yale lock, but I did some patent research 10 years ago, and there were a lot of lock inventors. And Yale did buy a handful of patents around that same time, and they probably were trying to acquire all of this knowledge and the rights to reinvent these locks. So it's very likely that his lock was purchased by Yale, or his patent was purchased by Yale, and it went on to contribute to developing what is the modern day Yale lock.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was also, as a young boy living in Warsaw, he was a revolutionary. In the early 1900s, Warsaw was occupied by the Soviets and had been for 100 years. And he was just like any other 18, 17, 18-year-old kid. He didn't like the Russians and didn't want them there, and was working with organizations that were trying to overthrow the Russians and get them out of Warsaw. And the police got onto him and found out where he lived, and they were coming after him to arrest him. And Aaron, I don't know if you know this part, it may be written up somewhere, but the other story that we didn't quite believe was that he had an older brother named Romuald.
Yes,
And
I do know this part.
Okay. Romuald evidently thought real quick and tried to figure out, how can we get my brother out of here before the Russian police, or whatever they called them, got there. And they dressed him up like a woman, disguised him as a woman, and put him on a train to Bremen, Germany. And he ended up catching a ship out of Bremen, and he was supposed to go to Argentina. And he changed his mind at some point and came to Galveston, Texas. And
that's a big switch up.
A switch up, yeah.
I'd love to know how that happened.
And he lost contact with all of the Muchowiches in Poland. He just didn't want. I think he was maybe afraid that they would track him down in Freeport or something. So we really, I mean, of course, I wasn't born yet, but the family stories get handed down, and he didn't talk about it much. He didn't talk about his life back home. And we, as a family, my mom and my sister and I growing up, we only knew that we were from Poland, but we didn't even consider that they could be other Muchowiches alive and living over there that were our first and second cousins. First cousins for my mom, but second cousins for me. And in the 1990s, my mom started doing family genealogy research. And this was before the internet, before Ancestry. You would have to go to a family search library and sit down with a microfilm reader and go through records and hope they had an index that would help you at least get to the right role and, film. And I only know about, I've not ever had to do it that way because all of my research has happened online. But my mom was actually in the trenches, traveling around. There's a great library in Galveston that had some good records. But she was able to back then they had message boards on, there was the internet, but it was mostly like
Right.
mailing lists and message boards. And she talked to someone who was from Poland, and he gave her some direction about how she might find out if these people really exist or still living. And a couple years later, my mom got a message that said, "Marilyn, you're not going to believe this, but there is a woman in Warsaw who has posted on a message board in Warsaw looking for the Muchowich family that left Warsaw in 1907,
Oh,
and we
wow.
think these are your people." And a couple of years later, I went over there. My mom, we all went together as a family, and we met these Muchowiches that are,
Oh, that's so
Cool.
cool.
thriving and doing just fine over in Warsaw. We stay in contact with them to this day. And I'm actually planning to go see them in November this year. My mom and my sister and I are going over to Warsaw to see them.
Oh, that
That
is
is
so
so cool. And
awesome.
it's just amazing to think that, escaped the Bolsheviks with, and probably, then gets to America with $12 in his pocket. And I know went through a bunch of businesses and, went through a bunch of hurricanes and tough times and, then starts, but how he gets into the shrimp industry is also just a fascinating story as well. And then gets his family into the shrimp industry, which is also just, it is that this is why I love this industry, is because these are the stories we have and this is what has created us. But don't let me tell it. Explain how that happened then too.
I don't, well, this is the best that I can do. This is the story that I believe is true. And my mother believes it's true. And we've got just like thousands of newspaper articles that you can go back through and read to try and fill in some of the gaps of what we don't know. Um, but he he in 1910 was in Port Arthur, and then in 1920 they were in Gretna, Louisiana, living in Jefferson Parish, just
I
across
didn't
the
know that
river from
part.
New Orleans.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, my grandfather's brother Joe, who I'm named after, was born in Gretna. Uh,
Really?
in 1929, when the stock market crashed, they were running a, let's see, he had a junk business. He was a junk man and had a dairy farm, and he also worked for the refinery. And the stock market hit, and they lost everything. I guess the value of all of the items that he had, was accumulating from collecting scrap. The value of it just dropped. And evidently, my great grandmother Anna had hidden away $500 somewhere in a mattress or something like that. So they had $500. And in 1929, he ended up making a run to Palacios. And that's south of where we are now. I don't know if you guys are as
Uh-huh.
familiar with the Texas coastline, but Palacios is south of Freeport. It takes about an hour and a half to drive there. Uh, but you can't drive along the coast. There's not a road that goes down. You have to kind of go out and around. And they noticed a lot of shrimp boats down there. And so he decided to spend the last of the money on buying 2,500 pounds of shrimp and bringing it back to Port Arthur. And he sold it on the side of the road for, I don't know, there are different numbers quoted, but I did read a newspaper story that said 25 cents for 2 pounds, but they had the heads on. And they would hold them up by the whiskers on the side of the road, and people would finally stop and buy it. And then they did it again. And the next time that they came back with a load of shrimp, they were waiting on him because they wanted more. And then he ended up somehow deciding it would be a good idea to buy a boat, and bought another boat and built this fleet. And by 1932, they had a fleet of shrimp boats. And by 1932, they had moved to Freeport, Texas, which is where I'm not in Freeport, but the business was always in Freeport.
Right.
Um, so that's what I consider to be our home, Freeport. And so, yeah, they've been, and they did that. They did the shrimp business, and, built boats and sold boats. And uh, then I think one day, this was the story. This is another. So they were out shrimping, and it was a slow day, or the season wasn't going to be a good one. And they started fishing. And so they brought in a bunch of red snapper. And red snapper was a great marketable, nice white fish,
Mm-hmm.
still my
Mm-hmm.
favorite fish.
Yeah.
Me too.
And they found a market for that, and then decided we ought to start thinking about maybe taking people out for deep sea fishing trips. And while the shrimp boats were still doing their thing, they had also started a sports fishing company called Party Boats Incorporated. What a great name,
Yeah.
and that, very simple. It said exactly what they did. And my grandfather was kind of the brainchild behind that. And but Carl was involved in that too. They were both involved, as well as my Uncle Joe. And I don't know if I said that already, but I was named after him. That's why I'm Stacey
Yeah.
Jo.
Yeah.
And I was born on his birthday. And so my
Oh, that's
mom, I
Oh,
don't think
really?
they were planning to
Okay.
name me Stacey Jo, but because I was born on his birthday, it seemed suiting and fitting for him. And but yeah, they ran the party boat business up until the 1970s. And but in the 1940s, in the late 1940s, when they started drilling offshore for oil and gas offshore Freeport, uh, they converted some shrimp boats into very early crude offshore
Yep.
supply vessels. Um, and they were not white; they were black. They were just, I don't even know what color they were because all the pictures are black and white, but they looked dark. Uh, and so they had two businesses going at the same time, shrimping and the party boats. And then this third one started materializing in the 1940s, and it was operated under the name of Muchowich Marine Services.
Mm-hmm.
a
And
mouthful.
I kind of always think of your family company as Muchowich. And
As
kind of, and
well.
you alluded to this, I always think of, and if anyone hasn't seen it, it's what I have to say, and I shouldn't say this because I have 60 some odd member companies that operate vessels, but the Muchowich crew boats are some of the best looking boats out there because they're all completely white and they're always white. They're not, you can have some bad looking offshore boats sometime. Y'all's boats never look, they're always white, they're always gleaming, and they're just a great looking fleet. Where did that come from? And I know it's even on your website that, a commitment to safety, white holes, and mariners.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that come from?
Well, I wish I had the right answer for you. Uh, I don't know for certain. The first crew boat that the family bought was in 1973, like the first straight up official
Mm-hmm.
built crew boat.
Mm-hmm.
They bought it from Seacraft, and the boat was partially under construction at the time that they bought it. So I'm not certain if Seacraft chose the paint color. Maybe they had a bunch of extra white paint laying around and decided, let's just throw this white paint on the boat and see what happens. Um, Either that or my grandfather picked it. It wasn't something we ever talked about. He didn't ever talk about, how about those white boats? That was a good call on my part, wasn't it? He never really took credit for it or even talked about it. It was just what they were. And the party boats were white. A lot of them were white. And think
Okay.
about when you go fishing offshore,
Yeah.
all those boats are white. Not all of them, but most of them are white.
Right.
So it could be a carry forward from having the party boats. And, my mom said that we always had white boats. It was just always from the very beginning. And then over time, it kind of became our brand to have a white, the white stripe. We have the white boat, it has a gold stripe with a harpoon on the end of the stripe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is kind of echoes back to the fishing days. Uh, yeah, and that the paint company that does the Maritime paint, I can't think of the name of the company, but the benchmark paint maker, it's called Muchowich Gold. That stripe.
Huh.
We have
That's
it.
cool.
I didn't even know that until a year ago. Someone said, yeah, they have it in their system as Muchowich Gold. So they've got the
I
formula.
I really like that, I love that about our industry that, you look at a lot of segments of the maritime industry and, one vessel looks like another and you can't even tell them apart, until you see the name or the number on them. But, our industry, with a lot of our member companies, you immediately know who it is from, you know, from 9 miles away or so. That's how far you can see at sea level. So you can see a boat on the horizon. You can start to pick out pretty quickly whose boat it is, and I like that about that. And I think it goes to the pride that our industry has about our vessels. That is really kind of what we do. And so that kind of leads me to what's your fleet size now? How many vessels does Offshore Oil Services run now?
We have six. We've had six since 2016. We had eight
Okay.
before that. Um, yeah, we had eight. I was real excited about running eight boats, and it was something that was going to be more of a challenge, and potentially could make us more money. And we acquired two vessels in 2014, right at the end of the year. It was in August, I believe. And if you think back to what the industry was doing in
Mm-hmm.
2014 and where we were coming from, and we had been on a good
Yeah.
run for a couple of years,
Yes.
and then the price of oil just started going down. And I think it was OPEC was flooding the market with oil,
Uh-huh.
and they were, it had something to do with they were, with the shale play. And anyway, by the beginning of 2015, we had them all, not all of them, but we had a good portion of the fleet at the
Yeah.
dock. And so we decided to reduce the fleet size down to six, more manageable number, and we've stayed
Uh-huh.
there. We've stayed there since I feel like in 2016 we sold the Stacey Jo, and I loved that boat. It was a great, beautiful boat. It was really
It's a
unique.
beautiful boat. Yeah.
And but that's the thing, is you just have to be you can't get too emotionally attached to your equipment. You can always get another one. It's not going to be the same, but you can do the best that you can to make it like the other one. And over time, the styles and the way that vessels are outfitted, they change. So it's not a
Yep.
bad thing sometimes to get a little smaller and reevaluate the market and where we want to be in that market, what fits for us and for our family. And for the past 10 years, it's been a fleet of six.
Well, and I think actually, and I know you've heard me say this, that the average AMSA member vessel operator operates six vessels.
Mm-hmm.
And people think about these as being giant corporations that are running these vessels. That's not true. Our average fleet is six. And I think that's a point that's really cool about our industry. And I like that about our industry, that these are, to use the common term, mom and pop businesses. And I think, your family exemplifies that. And, um, kind of one way that I see that is in your home office. I think I work with basically everyone in your home office.
I was just
on
about to say the same thing. Another thing about specifically your company and the OMSA membership as well is not only are there smaller fleet sizes, manageable fleet sizes, but so involved. I mean, we speak to everyone from the CEO and president down to the person on the boat, and you speak to everyone as well. It's just
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about your front office. This is not a large corporate structure, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's we our office is like a home. And I
hmm
don't know, Aaron, have you been to our office? The one
I
from
have not. I've
Okay.
been supposed to go at least once,
Yeah.
and something always happens.
It looks like a house, and we built it in 2009. It's right behind our warehouse. And I when I the builder, I sat down with the builder, and we didn't get a fancy architect, but there was an architect involved. And I said I want it to feel like a home, but I want it to be set up with offices instead of bedrooms. And so you walk in the front door, and there's all kinds of artifacts and historical images on the wall. We have a big steering wheel from a ferry boat that used to run across Bolivar, the Bolivar Ferry in Galveston.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of just sitting in there. I like to collect old things, and the guys on the boat, if they take an old component out or some kind of panel from the engine, from the wheelhouse, Usually, if it's old looking, they won't throw it away without asking me if I want to keep it. It's like, is this old enough for you to consider this an artifact? And most of the time it's no, but I've recently did add like an old analog panel that they took out of a boat. It sits in our office now. Um, but yeah, you walk in and we've got a receptionist. Her name is Jennifer. She's been with us for 14 years. It's her second term with us. She worked for us before that and then came back. She does all the greeting, and once you come in, you can go to the left and we have a kitchen. It's like a full-on kitchen with a little breakfast area with a bar, and the dining room is a conference room, so we can have pocket doors to close and have meetings in there. And then we have four separate offices on the other side of the office building, and they're each um, a lot of built-ins for storage. And I want it to feel like when I go to work that I'm at home. I want it to feel comfy and
Mhm.
cozy. It's professional, but there's nothing stuffy about it. People come in, and I want them to feel like they could just sit down and we're in the living room talking. Yeah. So the family, that's the other part. It's like, just having this environment where the guys, when they come to the office, it does feel like they're coming home. It's
Yeah.
cozy, and we welcome them. And I love seeing their faces when they're on. I typically only see them during crew change, and I don't always see them because the crew change can be in the middle of the night, and usually it
Right.
is. Especially the ones that are coming back. Ones that are going out, they
Mhm.
go out at a civilized time of day, and but the ones coming back, no telling when they're going to get back in. So I miss that side of it. But yeah, like we also have like a warehouse that we have offices that are built out for HSC, Haley, our IT person, offices over
Hmm.
there. And then we've got a bunk room because sometimes we'll have to put people up
Yep.
for a short period of time. If they're coming in for crew change and they happen to arrive at midnight, it doesn't make sense to get a hotel room, so they can just come and use our bunk room. And then they're already there the next day, and they get in the van and they go to the boat. So we use it when we get in a pinch, we have the bunk room. And a lot of storage, a lot of dry storage for old records. And we keep spare swing engines over there, gears um, to work, a work area for our mechanics to rebuild things. It's I love our office. I love that. I think it's exactly the way I want it to be.
Well, and I love that. And I do, I know, and I said it before that y'all have a commitment to mariners. And that's obvious with how you describe the crew change. But I think it's even, I see it and it's one of the coolest things, and I see a lot, is y'all have a recognition for employees, that have been with your company 10 years. Tell
Mhm.
everyone about that.
Yeah, when you've been employed with us for 10 years, you get your tenure ring, and you can choose from a couple different styles. Like there's a ladies version for smaller hands, and then there's the big chunky one that's like a college ring, thick like that.
Hmm.
Um, has our logo on it, and we typically engrave something on the inside, the name and maybe their hire date. And then we try to make a big deal about it. And if the crew member is based out of Freeport, it's real easy for us to all just run down to the boat and do the ceremony in Freeport on the boat. But when they're in Fushan, it's just not feasible for all of us to make that kind of trip. So there have been some ceremonies where they weren't as well attended by office staff. And then we've done some of the ceremonies in the office when they come in on crew change. It may not be on the
Hmm.
anniversary date, but it's within 2 weeks of their anniversary. And they seem to really like it. And it is a way to honor their loyalty to our company and to create goodwill between us. And it's set. I know that we've got guys that are coming up on. We've got a tenure this year. One of our captains, captain on the Raymond M, is going to have it in November. So we got one coming. But they all want one. If you've been there more than five years, your goal is to get a ring.
It's such a cool thing. And really, I think it goes to our commitment that these are kind of, And we've had, our last Maritime in America, the Fontenot's talked about it, that this is the family on board your vessel.
Yeah.
And they do work like that within these companies. And I think it's cool. And I'm always shocked. I follow you all on socials and I see it, and it just seems like it's coming up. I see one so often, and it's just so cool that you see that you have that many. Again, you're talking about a company that runs 6 vessels, so it's not like there are hundreds of people at this company.
Right.
But you see and you can I can mentally understand that, wow, there are so many people in this company that have been there 10 years. That's a great testament to the company. And I really applaud that. I think it's so cool, and it's a great commitment, and something that I think people outside this industry need to understand, that there are, come into this industry, you're going to find a home. You're going to find someone that's going to treat you like a family member. And that's really cool.
Do you think I've been with AMSA since 2012, and I think Offshore Oil is one of, if not the only company that I still have the same contacts there. I don't think there's been any bounce backs or anyone else. Like, I still know exactly who to contact for what. And that's what I struggle with
Yeah.
as the membership person at AMSA, is to find the right person at each organization. It doesn't happen very much, but it's been the same employees. We were actually talking about that the other day, the AMSA staff, when we were looking to put together a group, the group or whatever, to discuss regulatory issues. And we knew everyone at the company to contact from Offshore Oils. We were just talking about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put a lot of thought into how to respond to that, and then I ended up not responding because I wasn't really sure.
No
I
worries.
was going to forward that to some of our really seasoned captains, because they're the ones that they're boots on the
Yeah.
ground. I mean, they're the ones that,
Yeah.
and they're all really busy right now. But I think it's a great idea to try and eliminate if we're going to, eliminate some of the over regulation, and they're the ones that are going to have the best ideas. They're
When you
living
were
that.
talking about transitioning the shrimp boat to crewing, I just was kind of in my head laughing about, I would love to have known the regulations back
Oh
then.
yeah.
And like, could you imagine if
What
it was that easy right
regulations?
now?
Yeah.
Exactly. They literally probably just put like a pop-up tent with some cots underneath, and like, you just sleep over here when we need you.
Yeah.
And we're going to catch some shrimp while we're doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, I was really thinking, like, giggling to
It's
myself about the regulations back then, if there were any. I mean, so yeah.
Things have changed so much in this industry. I mean, when I was growing up, uh, Offshore Oil Services was well into its existence, and I don't know, we had a boat called the Joe Ray, and we had the Joe M and the Marilyn M, and we had a Stephanie and a Stacy, and they were supply boats actually. We bought them for some seismic work that took place in offshore Freeport. But I would go, I mean, like, on the weekends, we'd go fishing on the crew boats,
Yeah.
and it wasn't every weekend, but it was pretty often. It depended on the customer. And because customers, they're all in for that too. They want to go fishing. They bring their
Oh yeah.
family down and all their friends. And you've got this huge back deck of a boat. It's not like being on a party boat. I mean, you got plenty of room to stretch out. And my grandfather actually had one of the early crew boats fitted with a fighting chair for the back of the boat. And, I saw a picture of it, and I could not believe that he did this. But, the holes were in the back deck, where they just took they took the chair and would just insert it in to the holes. Someone's calling me. Okay, they're gone. Got rid of them. Yeah, the boat would probably stay in not the boat, the chair would stay in the warehouse. But whenever they were doing a trip like that, they'd bring that chair out and take it out and put it right in
That's
those holes.
awesome.
And there were sailfishes caught off the back of our crew boats.
Aaron,
I
did you do that? I feel like in the past few years, someone we know just did this.
With a crew boat recently?
uh
I don't know how you
Yes.
get away with that nowadays unless it's not on charter.
I mean,
But
I guess maybe we should not talk about this anymore.
I mean,
yeah, there
was
may
not.
be an AMSA member company that actually has converted an
Yeah.
OSV into just a customer, a business development offshore
I'm
fishing
here for it,
idea.
so I'm not going to talk
that I
about it.
know
So
of.
I can get invited.
Yeah, it's It's pretty cool. You can find pictures of it online.
Okay.
It's good. That's really interesting. I didn't know that y'all ever ran OSVs.
Short period of
And I
time.
think
Yeah.
yeah.
Hey,
It well,
I was just going to say,
go ahead.
Aaron, I
Go
was going
ahead.
to say for some reason, there's not a lot of history about the period of time that we were operating as Muchowich Marine Services, but I did find a box of slides, uh, the old Kodak slides that hold up to the light to see
Yeah.
what's on
Yeah.
it. And I could tell it were pictures of boats. And so I bought a slide reader, very crude version of a slide reader, and had the pictures in there upside down and backwards. But I was able to get a digital version of these boats, and they were big supply boats, and they were white, but they had red trim, and there was a Raymond M. And so these must have been the Muchowich Marine Services boats. So we did have some supply boats, steel hold boats at one
That's
time. Yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah,
Well, and it makes with where and getting this into kind of into the law side, if you were following the seismic market has been artificially carved out of the Jones Act by CBP. So that's probably where that went, if you connect the dots, and that's why we work so hard to enforce these laws is because those people, the vessels doing seismic and seismic support right now are not
mhm,
U.S. And that takes advantages away from Muchowich Marine and then from your mariners as well. So just to connect that
yeah.
back to the other one of the other purposes of AMSA. But I think it also goes to how innovative our industry is, and your family and your companies, plural, really typifies that of going from a shrimp industry, seeing that there's a market, converting shrimp vessels, and then purpose building. I mean, that's our history,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
but you don't see that in other industries, and I think it's so cool in this one.
Yeah, yeah.
Sta- Stacy, since this was a family business, how did you get into the leadership role? Did you see yourself? Did you want to be there, or was it kind of like a push from other family members? How did you get in the
Good
leadership
question.
role?
Good question.
There was no push from other family members at all. In fact, I had to fight to get hired. Uh, it wasn't ever talked about or assumed that I was going to work for my grandfather and for my mom after that. I was more bent toward technology. In fact, I liked programming computers, and that was what my degree was in. I ended up getting an MIS degree from the University of Houston because that was a combination of I got some business, but I was also able to do the technical
Hmm.
stuff. And my first job out of college, I was a COBOL programmer, and I did that for a long time. And then after that, I took a year off to have a child. My daughter Hannah was born and then I went back to work and I worked for a medical device company doing like Visual Basic programming with C++ language, and did that for a few years. And that device company was going to go out of business. And I'd always thought maybe I would want to work for the family, but what would I do there? How would I find my place there? And started having conversations with my grandfather, Raymond, about coming to work for the family. And he did not want me to do that. He wanted me to go do better things. You can go do better things. You don't need to work down in this mud hole. It's all these men, and it's just not a good industry for a young woman. But I was 30 by then. I was 31, I think, when I finally did go to work. And they put me in the worst office right by the kitchen, back in a corner. I was not treated differently. I had to find my own way through the company, and I did that through technology. My first job was to write a point of sale system for at that time we were operating the Muchowich dock, which was a marine terminal in Freeport,
Uh-huh.
and we did crane and labor services, and we sold drilling chemicals, and we sold fuel and water and lube. And so we had a dispatcher, and she would create a job ticket every time the phone rang from a customer. Hey, so and so boat's coming in, and we're going to need to get 10,000 gallons of fuel and 20 pallets of barite, or that kind of thing. And so I created a database, and that was my first job, was doing that. And so then that worked out real well. And then I kind of started learning the accounting side of it a little bit at a time. And I wasn't a stranger to finances. I could figure that out. And really stayed kind of in my lane for many years where I was just doing the numbers and running the financials. And heck, I could
Hmm.
do payroll if I needed to. I could do a customer invoice. I've done that in the past. I've sat in that
Yeah.
role. I've done, I was a dispatcher for a while. I spent a year dispatching and I worked, I had to talk on the sideband radio and the VHF radio when we were trying to talk to boats. We had no internet back then. The boats didn't have phones on them. So when they would get close enough, we could call them on the VHF radio. And I mean, I've had a lot of different roles at that company, and it was not understood that I was going to be leading that. And when I got hired in 1998, there were 4 people running that business that had been there a lot longer than me. And they
Hmm.
weren't going to kick one of them out to make room for me. I had to figure out where I was going to fit in with them. And over the years, just organically, I kind of became more of a leader because people would retire. They finished their, retire, and then there's a position opening. And I thought, well, I'll take the financial position. I'll be the financial officer of the company. And I did that for a while, and that was fun. And so it's just an evolution is what happened is, and I mean, I say I lead the company, but really the office staff and the mariners that work on the boats, they're leading the company. I'm here supporting them. And but I mean, I have so much gratitude for everyone that works for me. That's why I have the life that I have, is because of them. So yeah, I mean, that's a long answer, Angeli. I know but no, I was
Angel.
not earmarked for leadership, and I had to fight to get hired in. And then once I did get hired in, I had to figure out what I was going to do there. How was I going to contribute to the company? And over the years, it just, and I'm still doing that. I look at things today. What happens is I look at what people are doing at their desks and what takes up most of their time. And I try to come up with a system or a solution that's technology based that can do something quick behind the scenes, using AI. We do a lot of extracting information off of PDF forms and putting it into a database or into a list or a table in an Excel spreadsheet. And I mean, I can calculate our utilization up to the last log that's been submitted, because as soon as the boat captains submit their daily master's log, all of the data that they've put in is extracted down into SharePoint and into a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet has some fancy formulas and, some sort uniques, a lot of that kind of thing in it. And I've got tables set up. I mean, I can tell you how many days each boat has worked this month, what our utilization is as of the last log submitted. So that's my contribution today, in addition to being just a support for all of the people that are involved in the day to day. And I love being involved in the day to day. I like hearing the stories. When we have I mean, I don't like having any kind of mechanical malfunctions, but when it does happen, I want to hear the story about why it happened and what we can do to prevent that. And what did we learn from this? And so I, I'm just involved in almost every area, and it's my passion. I absolutely love doing what I do. It's more fun right now because we're really busy right now, and that's when it's fun to be doing this. When things are slow, it
Yeah.
can become kind of a drag, and you just got to keep your chin up and know that things are going to turn at some point. And when something goes down, it's going to go back up, I hope. And you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and doing the very best that we can.
Pivoting and being a little more creative with things.
Right.
And Stacey, I had the privilege of being the moderator for the Women in Maritime panel for an AMSA conference a few years ago, and that panel was, we had a few different. We had you, and then we had a mariner, a young mariner, and then we had someone in HR role. And the focus is always women in maritime as being on the vessels. But like I said, there's 3 against 1 on this call. As in the leadership role, though, there's not that many women at the table. And how is that? The AMSA board of directors, I literally get this. I've been at AMSA again since 2012, and I get the figure wrong every time. 21, Aaron? 21 board members?
21 board members, yes.
Got it. The 21, there's 2 women on, you and
Yes.
Caitlin Sauce, right? And that's nothing against, I mean, it's a phenomenon. We all work well together, but when you sit in that room, it's all men, and then, so how is that, not just OMSA board, but just in general, being a female leader, or, owner of a company in this predominantly male world, sitting at the table with these guys? Do you ever think anything different, or just kind of is how it's always been?
I mean,
I know that's a very tough question.
yeah.
You just seem so, you're just always so cool, and it is what it is, and nothing ever really, rocks your world. So I just was curious your perspective on things.
I don't know any different. It's always been like
Yeah.
that. And to me, it's normal. And we're all just people, really. We're all just people in the
Yeah.
same industry. And it's not related to the gender, it's what you're doing and what you have in common, and having a connection with them, just because, and a lot of the board members are with bigger boat companies and larger boats doing different types of work, but we're all doing work
Mhm.
offshore. And we're all dealing with the same struggles with regulation and the struggles of making good hires and finding, attracting, and retaining mariners. And so we have that in common. Um, it's not it's not really been an issue for me. Yeah, it's different than other boards that I'm on that are, about 50-50. But it doesn't affect me. I just feel like it's all I know.
And and I guess I didn't mean just the UMSA board. I meant like in the corporate world in general. You know what I mean? That is, and I'm thinking back on my words. That was no slight to the UMSA board. I love our guys, and they really are the most genuine people. I mean, when I personally have had issues, they've helped me professionally. I can go to anyone and get help. So no, I totally agree. I guess I just meant more in like the corporate world, like you sit down to do a deal, and
Yeah,
I agree with you that I don't really see a difference, but I know there is, and it's the conversation that comes up quite a bit, specifically in the maritime
yeah,
world.
yeah. Well, if there is any not ill feeling, but any an uncomfortableness about doing business with a company owned by a woman, I'm not aware of it. I'm not. It
Okay.
would be the men
Yeah.
would
Good
be
to
feeling
hear.
that way. If it's something that happens when I'm not in the room, I don't ever. I feel
Yeah.
when I'm at a board meeting or any OMSA event, I feel very welcomed and valued. I don't feel like an outsider. Definitely not because I'm a female at all. If I feel like an outsider, it's more about logistics. We're Texas. We're a Texas-based company.
Yeah.
We're not in Fushan. We're not even on the road to Fushan. We are, we're, it's a different culture, we're our own
Well,
country
that's
over
why you're
here.
a great asset, because you are different. You are a whole different aspect that we all need to hear
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
It is. As far, and now we have well, I guess we have board members on the West Coast.
Yes.
I don't think we have any board members on the East Coast, but we
We
have,
have East Coast
we've definitely
members.
gotten a geographic diversity. But it is funny, as much as we have diversified geographically, I still feel there's that Louisiana Texas tension. We've gone nationwide, but we still can't get our neighbors on the same page. Which is what, that's what created OMSA
Yeah.
was Bob Ilario working with the Hornbecks to bring the Louisiana group. That there was a OMSA in Louisiana, and then there was an OMSA in Texas, and it was Bob and Larry working together to bring those two together, which I think is funny that
Oh,
50 years later, we're still working on that
yeah.
problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that there was a
Mhm.
separate faction of OMSA in
There were two
Texas.
groups,
Okay.
and they were
Yeah.
doing the same thing.
And it
Um,
happened to be when we honored Larry Hornbeck for the Bob Ilario Award 2 years ago for our
yeah,
50th anniversary. It just, how everything happens for a reason. It just all came together that it was the 50th year of AMSA. We were celebrating Larry. And so we just kind of told this awesome story. It was really cool. I didn't know it either. I mean, I'd seen pictures of both events. When we moved offices, I just found it a trove of, you would have
Mhm.
loved it, are the artifacts that I found. I mean, it was so cool going
Yeah.
through everything.
We don't do
Um,
enough with them.
we do
We
not. We need to
have
be better.
great pictures of the people and the machines
Yeah.
Wow.
dating back in this industry.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, going from the past to the future, and you talked about this, and y'all have done a great job by cultivating that culture where you do honor that legacy. What's your best advice for how we as an industry get more people in to this industry? How can we show people what a great industry this is so that we can make sure that other Americans have the advantages and the benefits and the great career that this industry provides? How can we do that? And what's your best tip for that?
Well, yeah, I don't know what I'm thinking of is I think you guys are doing a good job with your social media campaigns. You're making it seem like you're putting mariners in the spotlight and showing what it's like to work on a boat and to manage a company that has a fleet of boats. And you're getting a lot of the different aspects out there through podcast and your Instagram and Facebook. So that's one way, is to show them, to teach them what it's like to work on a boat, because people don't know what it's like.
No.
They just, and it's important that they know what it's like before they take a job working on a boat. The main thing is they
Mhm.
need to know if they get seasick or not, because that seems to be the demise of a lot of really good new hires. And sadly, we lost one last night, someone that was new. And I guess it's
Oh
better to
no.
find out sooner than later that they're going to be sick. But I've been told you can get through it if you try really hard, and uh, we've got a list of things that we recommend to guys that are seasick. And some people
Yeah.
they don't want to get better. They just want to get off the boat, and they want off
Yeah.
now. And others will give it a
That would be
shot.
me.
They'll give it a shot and they'll stick with it. We've had them stick with it for a week or two, and I mean, you got to hand it to them. I mean, I've never been seasick myself, but I've witnessed a lot of people that have been seasick, and they're
It can
miserable.
be fun.
It's absolutely and
It is.
Yeah.
uncontrollable. They can't, one time I thought I was going to get seasick. It must have been just a combination of the smells and the temperature and
Uh-huh.
the ocean and what was happening with the seas that day. But I was able to just kind of like mind over matter it, just kind of put my mind somewhere else and get busy doing something. And we were about to start catching fish anyway. And it's, that usually you stop thinking about being seasick when the fishing starts or when the catching starts. Um, but
Read
we've
the
gotta
latter.
let people know what it's like being on a boat. And you know and we've got to teach them what they need to have in place at home in order to make it successful, especially right now with hurricane season.
Mhm.
We just started into hurricane season, and
Mm-hmm.
we every week we have a weekly teams meeting like this, but it's every single boat and every office staff member at 11:30 on Thursdays. We get together for meetings. And sometimes boats can't join us if they're under the crane or something like that. They can't be on the call, but
Right.
generally everybody's there every week. Um, and there's a weekly safety topic, and last week, the topic was hurricane preparedness. And the first thing that was brought up is you got to make sure that your family at home is prepared for a storm. They've got to be able to start the generator. They've got to know that they can handle the household when the power goes out, or you can't, because you're not going to be able to get off the boat and go home. And
Yeah. Yeah.
these new mariners, their family needs to be in the loop on what life is going to be like for them while their significant other is working offshore. It's not an easy life, but if you're salty and you like being on the water and being in nature and you don't mind working hard, there's a great career path for you. Not everyone is going to succeed all the way to the top, but there
Right.
are some that do. And, I've got our marine manager is one of those guys that started out as a deckhand, Michael Scarnito.
Yeah.
We hired him on as a
Yeah.
deckhand, and he worked his way up and got his 100-ton license. And and then was a captain for a while. And he worked on just about every boat in the fleet until he got to the point, and we do this, that we assign the lead captains to a vessel, and that's their boat. Along, there's
Yeah.
another one. There are two of them, and but those two captains are assigned. So Michael got assigned to the Anna M, and he was on the Anna M for, I don't really know how many. I want to say 5 years on the Anna M, and we happened to have a position open in the office for a marine manager. My manager was retiring.
Yeah.
It was he had a great career, but he was kind of done with it. And I looked from within. I want to bring in someone that's been with us, and there were two
Uh-huh.
people on the list, and Michael was ultimately the one that we chose. So he those are the kind of guys that you got to tell. How do we bring? Those are the ones that can give you the information about how to bring more mariners into the industry. I can tell you a game changer for us was over 2 years ago. We put Starlink on all the boats, and I
Yeah.
Yes.
mean, they can FaceTime. They can FaceTime with their
Hmm.
wife at night or their kids, and they can, when they're on their 12 hours off, they can watch a movie. I mean, we don't encourage too much streaming because that does take up uh, our bandwidth. But
Yeah. Yeah.
we have to, as boat owners and operators, we have to look at ways to improve the quality of life for the mariner while they are on board, and in order to attract them and retain them, because most of these guys, they don't know what it would be like to be on a boat offshore without any contact at home. It's a different world now.
Hmm. I think that's what I've learned the most. Captain Spade in the beginning was talking about how much that was the biggest change for him. And then with the Fontenot's, the last one, we had John's perspective, and then we had Cooper. And Cooper is working and getting his degree all at the same time. And he's studying on the boat because he has internet access. And I just think it's so cool. And I'm like, that's the story that you're right, that we need to keep getting out to potential new employees coming out to come work on the vessels.
Yeah,
It really,
it's cool.
it's so interesting, and it is, I really applaud our industry that you've seen so much of our industry that has adopted a not only that the vessels are Wi-Fi equipped, but it's useful Wi-Fi. It's 2025 supporting levels of Wi-Fi on
Hmm.
board vessels. Whereas, I was on a MARAD working group, and they were trying to figure out how do you bring in more mariners. And one of the things they said is, we should really look at including Wi-Fi on all MARAD vessels. I was like,
How do you not have that?
They
really,
don't have it
guys?
yet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was like, and what their report was indicating, they were like, well, we found out that there's not a shortage of mariners, really. There's just a shortage of MARAD mariners. And it turns out
Mhm.
that offshore energy has a ton of mariners. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, guys, I'll tell you why, not hard. And it's really, and that's what I hope that this podcast one does is that it, shows Americans what a great future you can have in the maritime industry, but also allows for mariners and people in this industry, and people that have that deck plate knowledge like yourself, that can, get that message out to the wider audiences of, this isn't that difficult. Listen to your people, try to answer their concerns and their problems. And like you say, everyone has a home
Mhm.
life. Take care of that home life, and they're going to be a better worker. It's not rocket surgery here. Come on.
Right.
Rocket surgery? Rocket
Yeah, I
science?
Ooh,
did that
rocket
intentionally. Yes.
surgery.
I was like, you just
That's a
pulled
new
a
thing.
me. He just pulled a me. I mix up everything. He calls me Biff Tannen.
Yes. Yes, I do. Um, well, I really, I like that. And that's a great strategy that y'all have developed there of, managing the home life, helping with that,
Hmm.
and making sure that they are connected, because it's, that is necessary.
And the bells were going off in my head while you were talking, because you're so right about hurricane preparedness and maybe AMSA. Maybe that should be our next thing. We were trying to think this summer or recently what we can do for our members. And maybe that's something we can touch upon, is helping any way we can get information out, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Well, one more thing I want to say that I feel has I've learned that how important this is over the years with our staff and our employees is that I think that we all, as humans, we want to know that we matter. That we matter, and every one of my guys
Mhm.
matters to me. Every person in the office matters to me, especially those people that I have long term. I mean, the new hire
Hmm.
from yesterday, he matters to me, and just fostering relationships with. I mean, I don't need to get an update every single crew change. But if you see me, and I see you coming through the office, I want to say hi. I want you to say hi to
Yeah.
me because you matter to me, and I'm here because of you. And we can't lose sight of that. And I hope all my guys know how much they matter to me and to the company and to my family and to the history of offshore oil services.
I'm sure they do.
I would bet the same.
Yes.
I would bet the
Yeah.
same.
Can I come work for you?
I'll put you on the list. We'll give you a call.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to check out your office. It sounds really
I know.
nice.
It sounds like we need an AMSA visit
That would be
to come
great.
check
I mean,
out.
if we ever did an OMSA event in Houston, we could probably
I would
dovetail an
love to.
office
That
visit.
And
is
you're
top of my list is to do an event in AMSA. And I've been talking with someone over at Tidewater with help to do something. We just got to figure out the right event to piggyback on, but I
Yeah.
am absolutely for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, we do have. I mean, we always have had again a big Texas component, and I
hmm
know down in not just in the Houston area in your neighborhood as well. We have quite a few member companies down there. We have
Hmm.
TNT, Laredo. We have quite a few member companies over there. Always have, and we need to recognize that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for
Um,
recognizing
so
me and my family's companies and the history behind it. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, it's just so cool,
It
and
is.
we love being able to do this and being able to highlight it. Like I said, I've always known your family history and found it so interesting and so cool. So I'm really that, like I've said before, I like that we have found a platform to get these stories out because they're a great piece of Americana, and it shows that why this industry is important.
Mhm.
I think we have talked a lot about, oh, well, we have to have the Jones Act to support American businesses. But we don't ever talk about the why, and the why is because these are great people that deserve support. And, I hope this story shows that. And that's we always kind of end with main takeaways. That's my main takeaway is, we need to support industries that are vibrant, that are innovative, that are taking care of fellow Americans and do that. That's my main takeaway from today.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. Angelle, what is your takeaway?
Well, my takeaway was you know a lot about your history and the history of the company, and I think that is amazing. I love how you treat your employees, and I love those weekly calls that you talked about where all of the um, crew members from the vessels get on the hop on the call. So it's like a full company call. I think that's amazing because usually those calls are with the executives only or maybe with the mariners only, but never like together. So I think that's really cool. I do have a question. With your knowledge of all of your history, all of the industry history, or not all, but the industry history and your company history. What are you excited about over the next few
Good
years?
question.
Mm. I, I mean, I think that there isn't anything specific that I can say that I'm excited about, but what I can tell you is that we've got to keep our eyes open for opportunities. And,
Mhm.
space, somebody told me 2 or 3 years ago, space was
Hmm.
going to be a player in this industry. And I was like, are you sure? That doesn't sound right to me, but it's turning, they're going to continue
Yeah.
launching
Yeah.
rockets over the water and it's going to happen and it's going to continue happening. They're just learning right now. Everything's a training mission now, but it's not going away. I don't know what the next latest greatest thing to be excited about. I hope that we I would just like to have 2 good years in a row. Can we just have 2 good years in a row? I promise I'll do it
Yeah,
right this time.
Please.
It's like, it's like, come on. It's like we get a couple good months and then it's like 12 bad
I
ones.
know.
It's like 1 step forward and 2 steps back in this industry, and it's a struggle. So I wish there was something that I could come up and say, that's what I'm excited about. But I'm,
you're excited about 2 good years.
yeah, I'm excited.
Put it out there in the
Yeah, I'm
world.
excited about, I just need to be paying attention and reading the road signs, and we'll find out what the next generation is going to be. What's going to be, what's going to happen in 10 years. I don't know. I wish I had a crystal ball, but I don't have a crystal ball. I'm just going to pay attention to what's happening.
I like
Yeah.
that.
Ashley, how about you? What's your takeaway?
I was going to say my biggest takeaway, and for the record, Stacey, my takeaways are never maritime related. Last takeaway was that I need to be a better mother. This takeaway is that I need to do more of my own family history, because totally geeking out, fascinated by all that y'all have done with your family. And I know that my family has similar roots, people coming here. Aaron hates when I bring this up, but we're Native American. I'd love to do more on that history. We
Haven't
being
done a
me,
DNA
not him.
test yet.
So the tribe is not federally
Oh, okay.
recognized yet. However, I have been thinking about getting more involved so our daughter could get a scholarship for something.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just think that's really cool that you can trace back, and not only trace back, but then you've pushed forward and found relatives. That's just really
Yeah.
cool. So that was my takeaway, that I need to
is
be
cool.
more involved in my family history.
Well, Stacy, thank you for everything you do for this industry, and thank you for taking time to be part of Maritime in America. And it's great to have your stories and your commitments to your workforce and to the larger maritime mariner industry. That's great to see, and we appreciate having you as a guest on the podcast, and as a member company, and as a board member. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And it's been great to talk to you.
My pleasure.
So thank you so much, and take care and
All
be
right.
safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
See y'all.
That wraps up another episode of Maritime in America. We're proud to highlight the voices and stories that keep the American offshore industry strong. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us, and remember, the course ahead is shaped by those who step up and steer it. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your crew. Tune in every Friday for your offshore briefing, and don't miss our next full episode, dropping soon with a very special guest's mariner's perspective. Catch you next time.